Welcome, everybody, to the Raad Life, the only talk radio show that takes you along with host and age explorer Rod Gontos on his continuing journey of discovery into life's challenges, opportunities, options, and all the latest and greatest things that come with getting older. The Raad Life is brought to you this week by Your Home for a Lifetime, a company dedicated to empowering you to stay safely, independently, and comfortably in your own home. And now here is your host, Rad Gontos.
Well, gee, to big surprise, Rad Gontos is not here. He's not in the studio yet. Hard to believe. Never happened before. Well, he's great late. He's out there in the world. So this is Paul Roberts, his trusty sidekick and engineer of the show, going to kick things off today here. Let's get the show started rather than waiting anymore. And our guest today is Noelle, and I forgot how to say your last name.
Hipke.
Hipke. Why is that so hard to remember here? Noelle Hipke, who is a realtor here in Orange County that has a very unique specialization. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, I'm a seniors real estate specialist, and I have been doing this for 12 years. There is a certification that the California Association of Realtors came out in 2005, and I acquired it then. I had an experience that led me to really want to work with seniors. I had injured my back and was doing aquatic physical therapy for about 3 years prior to having back surgery. And I met a lot of senior citizens along the way. I heard horror stories about how they were taken advantage of, and they're in a lot of situations where they are heavily medicated and disabled. So I grew concerned to want to help this community of people, especially as I got to know them. So over the years, I had other experiences. My mother worked in assisted living doing sales and marketing with seniors.
Wow, you got all sorts of connections.
I do have great connections. And she would tell me great stories about the residents that lived in the community. So I just started to really be fond of wanting to help the older population. And then my sister actually owned a vintage store out in Visalia. So she had a lot of antiques and vintage clothes. So I decided it would be really fun to wear vintage clothes to get people with memory problems to remember me.
Ah, okay. Well, you're certainly dressed to the nines, as they used to say here in my father's era today here.
Yes, it's a lot of fun, and people like to see the different eras and decades I'm wearing, and oftentimes they'll give me clothes or hats and different things they want to see me wear because it just brings back memories.
You look sort of like, I'm a fan of old movies here, Dorothy Lamour here. Ooh. She has that kind of, with the flower in the hair and the sarong and all this stuff here. So
I'll take that.
So anyway, on the road to Morocco or whatever, go look up all the Hope and Crosby movies here. So all of a sudden you found yourself interested in working with seniors. Now, the one thing that I, as somebody in their 60s now, are seeing daily that nobody discusses is the downsizing of the seniors. As I get older, I don't seem to want as much stuff. As my kids move out, I don't need as much stuff. And as I suddenly look ahead at 30 years that I haven't saved for, I suddenly am fearful to spend money. I want to suddenly save money here. Is any of that what you're seeing out there?
Well, they are on a limited budget, so they definitely live within their means, and they typically do not remodel their homes. So, and they happen to be hoarders. They are in their homes for decades.
God. You've seen my house, haven't you? Here?
Decades and decades. So for them to get rid of something is really emotionally traumatic. There's a lot of memories associated with these items. So that's kind of part of the process of downsizing, is going room by room on this and breaking it down into chunks. Because when you're looking at a big house and they're overwhelmed with all the responsibilities of taking care of it, they need to break it down into smaller chunks.
But you're a realtor. You're just supposed to sell them something.
I know, but it's never just that in my book. I try and give them all the resources and providers that I can to help it be a simple, streamlined strategy.
So let me give you an example. This show is Rod always kids and says this show is part of my therapy here. It's part confessional and part therapy. So as people who've listened to the show know, my parents moved to, I'm an only child, my parents moved to Sun City out in the desert 20 years ago after living in the Midwest their whole lives in a big house. And when they finally came out here 20 years ago, they've since passed away, but when they came out here, it was horrible. My mother held on to every every lamp, every coffee table, everything, like it was the most precious thing in her life. And my father, one by one, pried all these things out of her hand, and they blew everything out other than their bed. They felt like they were newlyweds again. They came, they bought a new house. It was going to be their final house. It was smaller than their big house that they rattled around back in suburbia. And I have a picture of my mother as she's leaving. She's like in her late 70s at the time. And she looked like a homeless person. She looked like somebody who had lost everything in one of these natural disasters. She looked like she was just going to cry. Everything she had in life was gone.
Well,
and then she came and suddenly got to buy new stuff and got to decorate again. And suddenly she went from the worst moment in her life to the best moment in her life. It was magical to see that when she finally let go of that stuff. It was so liberating.
Well, and there are a few things that they should not maybe or will not let go. And that might be the memories of a cookie jar.
Yeah.
Your hands were in that cookie jar. Your friends' hands were in that cookie jar.
That's probably
Maybe
true.
your grandchildren's hands were in that cookie jar. So that's irreplaceable. So that cookie jar might be the one thing she needs to take. Or an Afghan that has been in the family for a long time.
Yeah, we got to get you to talk a little more into the mic. There.
That's a little more dying art is Afghans. Who does that anymore?
She brought an Afghan with her. Yes, we have an Afghan.
Love it.
You're nailing everything here.
So I have actually some Afghans in my house that are priceless to me, and they will be carried down to my children.
But I guess the point was, it was so horrendous for her to even think of letting this lifetime accumulation of stuff go. And yet, it was not a happy life back there. They lived in a house that they couldn't handle anymore. It was a burden to my dad more and more to especially in the winter, to put the stuff out and bring it in and do all the stuff they loved doing. They had big garden stuff. He stopped doing that years ago. That wasn't fun anymore. That was hard to do. So, and he used to say, our life has changed. And she's like, but I don't want it to change. And I feel the same thing. And my wife and I are kind of going through the same thing. She doesn't want to let go. She doesn't want to change. And I'm like, well, I'm not saying I want to either, but we have to. We're going to have to at some point sell our house, take that equity out, and will make up for what we should have been saving our whole lives here and didn't, or the money we lost when her 401k went down and all these other kinds of things here. So there's a real transformational stage that I've seen my parents go through, and now I'm starting to go through. Talk about that. What do you see people doing? And not just it's one thing if you really, I also have an aunt who's 93. She's faced with one last move where she's going to have to take what little she's got left in her apartment and downsize it one more time to go into a nursing home, basically.
Right, and there
bed.
are so many options that they can go into that people aren't aware of. So the first thing you really need to do is plan ahead before a crisis occurs.
Oh, but that's hard. Nobody wants to
and
think
no
about
one wants to talk about it, but it's inevitable.
Yeah.
I at 37 years old, I planned my funeral. I knew it was going to happen.
Crazy.
It's going to happen.
I can't even think about mine now at 62 here. Yeah.
And you'd believe it, I actually had an 83-year-old woman call me and ask me for a referral to plan her funeral and her will and trust recently. It's when you're buying a home, you really should be putting all those things in motion.
My aunt bought a new car at 90, and I'm like, why are you buying a new car? Well, I need a new car. Well, the unasked question is, are you going to live to use this new car here? It's a crazy world that we live in where we don't want to face or deal with mortality.
But when you face it, you have a say in how things are played out, how things are divvied out.
That's Rod's point all the time in this show.
You want to have a family meeting. Have a family meeting. Talk about the direction you see yourself going. Explore your options and your housing needs, the level of care, your independence, your privacy, your needs, your future needs. Just go and check out your options and get assistance and support.
Well,
that's where you would
we've
start.
now got some assistance and support. You're going to see a mysterious man walk in front of the camera here right now.
Following up on your joking at the beginning, I was on the road.
On the road.
To Costa Mesa instead of Morocco.
Hi.
That's right.
Good.
But I don't know if you saw. I was actually listening in, and
I could tell. Yeah.
I was asking some questions because here's the thing. The aging in place market, you guys were talking about everybody downsizing, right? The aging in place market is like $30 billion, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And So
and a market that other
I
than
couldn't
the
wait
two
to
of-
get in here because one of the things that, and it's not because I'm an aging place, right? Or the fact that we have an aging population that up to like about a year ago or 2 years ago, the real estate market was in the dumpster, and pretty much if you were having to downscale and use the, if you will, traditional approach to aging, which is that at some point you have to sell your bigger house and move to a smaller one,
right?
That you were going to take a bath on the house.
Yeah.
That you have basically been building equity in
She
for
was
the
saying
last 20
before you
years.
came, or
Right.
that you're in such an urgent move to do it. I got to get out now. I need the money. I need to move into a nursing home or something.
Well, and the cost of which is exuberant. I mean, it all
And
comes
people
out of
don't know
savings
that.
and equity.
That is huge. People don't even realize how much it costs
Full
to
load,
age.
full boat, and I think I maybe I looked into it like 2 months ago. So that means it became obsolete probably about 1 month and 29 days ago, right? Like the day after it probably became obsolete. A full boat was something in the range of about $7,000 to $8,000
wow.
a month. Okay, so you do the math. If you've got about $100,000 of equity in your house, the first year you're pretty much out of that equity, right? If you have $1 million home, you got about maybe 10 years, maybe of use on it. If you're full on, or if it's 2 people, then double that, right?
Right.
In terms of cost. So absolutely correct, and I heard it. You know, you got to plan for this stuff, right? I don't know that I would. I'm going to come clean. I'm like Paul. I haven't planned for my funeral, right? But
Funeral. I'm gonna
Right.
live forever.
right, yeah, baby boomer. Just ignore him. We do, but no. I mean, what I wanted to interject into this conversation is there's this standard conversation that's been taking place for the last 50 years. This is the routine that you do. You know, it's almost like you graduate high school, you go to college, you get a degree, you get a job, you get the house, and then when you get older, you downsize. Well, 2 years ago, when I looked at some statistics, 25% of sales to baby boomers were actually to bigger houses because they wanted homes that basically their grandkids could look at as being second homes, especially if anybody has had
Or they're
grandparents.
forced to because their kids are still at home and they're
Or,
bringing their families
like
with
in
them.
your case, in Paul's case, where he basically became a multi-generational household.
Right.
A lot of the houses that are being built in Irvine right now that are up near Tribuco, those are larger homes. Now they're being sold. A lot of them are sold to Asian population, Chinese investors, and so the nature of the family dynamic and structure, basically, the house domicile has to basically accommodate. Right? It's a different kind of thing. So my take is my question, I guess, is this. Why do we keep perpetuating that there's this one way of aging and being housed while you age, when in fact not only is that not necessarily true, because you're starting to talk about options, right? But also, if we go down that path, there's a possible negative impact on our financial status, which we are now living longer, so the savings and the equity has to last longer, right? And nothing's getting cheaper. So when we say prepare, I think it's kind of an overwhelming task to ask somebody to do, right? And when they
Ain't
don't know
doing
that
it.
they
I
have
ain't-
options.
I ain't doing it.
That's perfect. He's a perfect poster child for the show.
Ain't doing it.
Right? We've been
Just
doing
put
this
it
for
off,
3
put it
years
off.
now. We've been doing this for 3 years. Okay, I sat him in the hot seat about maybe 3 months ago, right? And I told him, okay, so all the stuff that we've been talking about for the last 3
Prepare
years.
your will, prepare
And
your
have you done any of it?
finances,
And his
down-
answer was
Of course, hell no. I'm not gonna
0.
Think about any of
And
this
he's
stuff.
sitting like 2 degrees of separation from the information. Not even 2 degrees of separation. He's closer to the
Because it's
information than I am.
frightening and overwhelming, and so you put it off. You put
Right.
it off.
So let's step back for a minute, right?
Well, but let me answer.
How do you get people to actually accept the fact, not out of fear, right? Because if it's out of fear, I'm going to push it off as late as possible and might get to it begrudgingly if I even get engaged in it, right? How do we change the narrative here to where this becomes a conversation about empowering the quality of your life?
Very true. And you know, the holidays are coming around right now, and this is when all the
Perfect.
families are going to gather.
Perfect
They're
timing.
going to see their relatives have declined a bit in health, and this is a perfect time to talk about
Yeah,
it.
you haven't seen him for a year,
Right.
and you're
Over
having to repeat
Thanksgiving, I'm
yourself.
going to say, hey, Grandma, you're not looking so good here. Have you thought of moving?
Well, if you don't move, and I heard about your Afghans, right? If you don't remove your carpets off the floor, you may be having that conversation with Grandma a lot sooner than you think.
Well, and statistics are that people tend to pass away right after the holidays.
Yeah.
There's a big swoop. So
There
It's
is.
a good
Is
time.
And it's got nothing to do with the quality of the turkey.
Is
by
that
the way.
really true, or is that an anecdotal thing? Because my mother died right after the holidays.
Don't you have some family members that you just want to just basically
Well,
you
yeah.
know,
But-
avoid
but-
like the plague,
But
right? So
most
it's
of my mom and dad died or got
We
very
love you
ill
guys, but-
shortly after the holiday in January, and I've always seen that somehow you hang on through the holiday.
what was on the menu?
I don't know.
No, but
seriously, I'm telling you, I see this a lot where seniors. Something about there's an impulse to survive through the holidays, and then right around the end
to
of the
reconnect, to almost maybe have that closure. Some cases, maybe.
I
But
see
no,
a
but
lot
I
of
mean,
people.
like you're saying, you haven't seen them maybe for a year. They come in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, hi, and there's this reality check because there's been a time frame where you haven't seen them. It's almost the same as having, not seeing like a nephew or something for a year, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, like what happened? The growth spurt, and now they're talking stuff that a year ago they were playing with Legos. Now they're basically engaged in what's current events or something, right? So I think it's interesting that there is absolutely, like you're saying, an opportunity with the holidays
Correct.
to engage with each other differently. And it is, to Paul's point, kind of a tough thing to get your mind around because, I'm going to be celebrating and let's talk about giving up the driving license.
Yeah, right.
Or let's, have that.
They almost go back to children. They turn into children again. They don't want to move. They don't want to make change. They don't want to admit that what's happening.
I'm not going to
you
take a
know?
nap.
Right? Right? They're taking naps.
They're taking naps.
And then maybe dementia's setting
Uh-huh.
in, and that's changing the way they're functioning, their loss of vision, hearing. I mean, things are starting to really
If they haven't
change.
really spent time on enhancing their
So how do
physicality
you
and their
help,
core and stuff, now their propensity to fall, and they're kind of wobbly and shaking on their feet, and so
Why are you looking at me when you keep
Huh?
saying this stuff?
because you have done nothing in 3 years.
So
of
how do
all
you-
that we've talked
how
about.
This
do
is a
you-
wake-up call, by the way.
How do you help, Noelle? You're a realtor. Come on,
Paul, this is a wake up call.
you're here just to sell stuff. Come on, you're not here
Not
to
really, no. I've
transition
actually
people.
been networking with a lot of senior service providers for 12 years now and building a great stream of resources. So it's not always about selling the home, it's coming up with the best strategies.
For that particular person. right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's so many different housing options out there that people are not aware.
Mm-hmm.
So, they might even want to go into assisted living and rent the home to have income to pay for
Sure.
assisted living.
That's an idea.
That's,
Well, and there's certain legalities and there's certain restrictions, like if you have a reverse mortgage, as far as a primary residence or whatever. I mean, there are things that you need to be aware of. So educating yourself early before dementia sits in. I'm looking at you.
I
Right.
can't help myself. I got to move Noelle's mic a little bit here. She can.
Okay.
he just wants to get close to
Yeah,
me.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Well, actually, one of
That's
the
my
things I
cheap
did say
excuse,
when he went down the path of, like trying to make current references to like what was it, Hope and Crosby.
Dorothy Lamour. She looks like Dorothy
Yeah,
Lamour.
so I actually did post on there, so it's on your Facebook feed right now. It says "Behave yourself, Paul." So
That
or
looks
was
like
that?
Dorothy Lamour. I'm
Right,
sorry.
but okay. So let's talk about that because, to Paul's point, initial reaction is, yeah, real estate. You're going to basically just got to sell the house, especially you've held on to
Just
it for
transactional.
for a good
Yeah.
time. You're in a good great location. Man, I can't get my hands on that house fast enough to move it, right? But you've been in this for 12 years, so let's talk about some of those options. Is the question is this: is it always the right thing to do
To sell?
to sell?
No, not
Okay.
always.
All right. So when is it the right thing to do? And then let's talk about when it isn't, from your experience.
Well, a lot of my clients do actually end up selling, but I do give them the other options
Okay,
and
so
resources.
all right, so
And they tend some of downsizing and going into retirement communities or senior condos. A little more simple life, less maintenance.
and are we talking about, like, I make a reference to a property that opened up relatively recently, as 5 years or so, in San Clemente, like where it's a multi-unit, independent living, but a multi-unit kind of almost apartment complex, if you will, or a condo complex. It's not really necessarily freestanding or detached homes or something like that. Is that when you say
They're more
senior
active.
living? Are
See,
you
there's different levels. If they're very active, they
Right.
can live in this certain type of housing.
Correct.
If they're not as active, it's going to be a different type of housing.
or 55 and plus communities?
And you know what? They're now 50, believe it or
Right.
not. Many of the senior centers are 50.
Damn, I could buy into that.
Yeah,
see?
we're all getting there. It's going to happen.
Well,
If we're lucky, we'll make it that long.
well, I'll remind everybody that as far as the legal term for senior, It's actually 50.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 52. I basically should be like looking for a walker.
Oh!
Okay, no, I'm just kidding. But I mean, the point is that it's kind of unbelievable that how the age in terms of numbers. I'm a 50-year-old, but I don't feel like I'm more than 30, right? I mean, there's been a mindset change. There's been a physical paradigm shift in how we age and get older, right? And our housing. This is why I keep bringing it up. Our housing, our approach to how your housing should be when you get older, has just sort of dragged. We haven't really changed.
We're behind the times.
We're behind the times.
It's changing.
Right.
I see it changing. There's new developments coming into cities who are aware that seniors need a different way to live.
Right.
So what I'm seeing, I'm actually going to pull this out now and just tell you, because I maybe with your interior design background, you're going to be pulling some of this in. They are doing in-wall tablets now, so everything is voice activated.
Absolutely, all the
automated,
technology.
because my mom's losing her vision, so that will be great for that, those elderly. They're actually talking about putting blood pressure checkers in their house, so they can basically put their arm in, get their blood pressure checked. It'll send it directly to the doctor's office, so that way they're keeping a status of their health.
And I'll tell you this: when we do interior design, but we do wellness and spas. What you're talking about is not even age specific. What you're talking about is a wellness and maintenance component that if you had that in your house, knowing what your blood pressure is, knowing that your heart rate is good, it's not information that is limited to somebody who's older and in crisis. It's actually information that's handy to have, almost like you go to a dentist to get a dental checkup.
Correct.
So it's not even age specific.
I mean, it could be disabled too.
Absolutely, you could have been out surfing at Trestles in San Clemente, and you bought a big wave, and you ended up basically crushing your spine. The next thing you know, you're 18-year-old kid that basically is in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. So it is interesting that we kind of package it in this sort of almost medical, vulnerable population thing, but in fact it isn't. It's just the way we've been looking at it.
But can I point out the
long.
one thing that you're not talking about here, and you've talked about before on this show, two things really that all fit together into one idea, which is, are the cities taking into account the aging population, particularly here in Orange County, not just in terms of housing, but in terms of what else do they need? And maybe they're going to need more public transportation or buses or other things. Maybe they're going to need more hospitals closer instead of regional
your
centers shutting them
infrastructure,
down.
your public policy, your development, especially in established communities, where people are not going to want to move. Why would you move out of a familiar surrounding when you're in need of that assurance most, right? It makes no sense unless you medically cannot be sustained in that environment. No, cities not only, I think, Paul, are dragging, although Noelle just said, there are cities are starting to wake up. I will even offer this. A city in Orange County, per capita, the data says, has the largest concentration of baby boomers and seniors in the country, not Florida, right? And that the largest concentration
It's a percentage of population.
Percentage of population,
right.
And that the largest percentage of the concentration is in South County. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So if that is the case, I'm offering this as a reality check to cities. If you don't wake up and actually modify your approach to more of a multi-generational at best, if you don't want to go solely senior, okay, but multi-generational community development, infill projects, support systems, alternative transportation, all this stuff, you're going to miss out on these deep-pocketed investors that are looking to relocate, okay, maybe from a villa park to a Laguna Beach, all right, and are willing to do it if this infrastructure is in place to support their quality of life as long as possible. And if you don't, the city next door that does it
will get their business.
That's where the business is going to go.
Definitely. And they need a high walkability rating so they can walk
right
places.
Right.
They need to volunteer.
Right.
As seniors, they lose their self-worth.
Right.
And then they become isolated, and their nutrition fails because they don't want to cook for one person.
Exactly.
So many things start to come into place.
But you hit on the other half of my question.
Oh.
Not only are cities not prepared for this aging in place population and their different needs, transportation, housing,
and call it
medical
ageless
needs,
living.
whatever.
It really is ageless, because as a baby boomer, as a baby boomer wannabe, as you refer to me,
That's
right?
Just a
or
wannabe.
a Gen Xer, I don't necessarily want to age in an environment where everybody around me that I look out of my window every day is of a person of my age. I want to see a range. I don't necessarily want to have a child crying next door, but I want to see a range of people. I want the diversity and this mindset that we have that we're just going to like take everybody in a nice little box and take them from this neighborhood box of single family, 2-story, 2-car garage, 2.3 kids, and then put them in this like a little smaller box where you have other people that are all exact same. You might as well just basically put me out to pasture. Right. I mean, I do not want to. I mean, I'm sorry. No disrespect to anybody, but that is not the kind of dynamic quality of life that I want, even at that age.
But you perfectly set me up. We still
I
live in
usually
a
do.
paradigm where old people are supposed to be removed,
Just like kids, seen
take
and not
them
heard,
away,
not
and
even
put them
seen.
somewhere else where they can be safe, where they can be monitored, where they can be cared for, where they can be isolated, and then the rest of the community frees up all that inventory for young people to buy those houses.
You mean the young people that can't afford to live in San Clemente that are
We don't
moving
have
into
to
the,
change
into the inner
anything.
desert? It's a reversal that has happened.
Once
And
you
that's
get
why
to,
we're here
yeah.
today, to give them a voice.
Right.
Right.
We're trying to make this known and further educate everyone. Get involved.
I mean, what was
Pay
it?
attention.
Like maybe
Pay
20,
attention.
20
Wake
years,
up.
20 years ago, maybe what you did as a person at a certain age once you transitioned, it was like, does somebody just like unstamp your residency from your current residency and say, okay, you got to go, pack your bag, put it all in the car. It's like the Dust Bowl. You got to
Right.
go out to the desert, right? And,
Right.
And you would have Del Webb communities and stuff like that, right?
Where my parents lived, right?
Right. It wasn't that long ago that I walked through a brand new Del Webb community, and I'm not picking on Del Webb, but Del Webb community in Arizona, in Nevada, right? And it was definitely a 50, 55 plus community. Their approach to providing a house that would be sensitive to a person of that age was to have energy efficient stuff in it.
Well, that's because they're low budget right now.
But that was it. The corridor widths were not there. The ability to
lighting.
you had counters in the kitchen, brand new homes. Had counters in the kitchen where you would require a bar stool that you would not use. You'd want a lower
Exactly.
counter. All of these things were not factored in. There was a step up. There was a 0 threshold entry on the front door, but then there was like an 8-inch almost drop from the back sliding door to the patio.
Right.
So it was interesting to see that, only because to me that was trying to be sensitive, but it really missed some of the critical stuff inside, and the selling pitch was energy efficiency.
When my parents bought in Sun City, it was for the lifestyle. It was not when they moved into the house, particularly as my mother got more of an invalid and had Parkinson's and started ending up in a wheelchair. They had to retrofit some of the house in the senior community to accommodate her. They didn't really have a 0 threshold at the front door. They certainly didn't have one going out to the patio. They didn't have one getting into the shower.
Current in our neck of the woods, Laguna Woods, which used to be Leisure World,
Right.
okay, built multi-story buildings
Yeah.
that had no elevator.
Right. Right. This is how they built senior housing.
Because that wasn't what you did. When you retired, you were going to go play golf, and nobody really thought about this sort of quality of life component. You get to the point where you need an elevator, we're just going to ship you off to somewhere else.
Right. That's my whole point. So we haven't
No,
taken
it's,
into the.
it's kind of like mind-boggling, right? Because
We've assumed
There's
that
no elevator
everybody,
in a
when they get to
multi-story
a
building in a
certain
retirement
point,
community.
leaves, and therefore we'll just house them, put them aside. We don't keep them integrated in the community. We're not, like you talk about senior centers. Why can't senior centers be a place where seniors are
shouldn't be a senior
interacting
center.
with kids?
I will. Will you go to a senior center?
Never.
Something called a senior center. Were you going to walk
No.
through the door of a
Why
senior
would
center?
you not go?
Hold
They
on.
Because
have
it
the
says-
best activities.
Because it
No,
says
but
senior.
This is a repeat conversation.
I ain't
for us.
walking
Hold on
in the
a second.
door that says senior. I'm not a senior.
So what would you go to?
I don't know, but I might.
A wellness center?
Yeah.
So we need to change the names.
Absolutely.
Community
The
center,
narrative, the
yeah.
language is super important. If you refer to somebody, we had a lady here, and we were talking about when we first started the show, and we were kind of like greener on the gills. So we basically
You were so much younger.
Yeah,
then,
we're
too.
so much younger. I'm aging by the minute here. We're sitting with you every week. But we said that, Paul would say he's a baby boomer. I'm a baby boomer wannabe, right? And we said that with baby boomers, they start out being hippies, then they became yuppies, and now what the heck are you guys now? Because we got to come up with something else.
Buppies
and
or
we came
something,
up
yeah,
with
right.
uppities, like
Uppities,
because
yeah.
they're all uppity and they all want their stuff and they want it now. So we had a lady here, and we were just trying to. We kind of had like a challenge, like what's going to be, who's
The
going
new
to come up with
catchphrase.
the best phrase?
Well,
right?
you need to come up and turn into techies now because that's where
Yeah.
it's
Well,
going.
Well, they are
Right.
techies. They have to, and actually they're techies because that's a way for them to communicate with their grandkids. It's kind of funny, right? But so this lady, Ellen, and it was Ellen Skaggs from National Aging in Place Council, right? And we were having this little, back and forth going on, and she says, "Well, why do I need to have a label?" She says, "I'm just Ellen."
Mm.
And
Rod
that
likes
right
that.
there told you exactly that individual sense of identity that is of this generation that's coming into that age bracket that is totally different from what came before. So how do you provide a sense of individuality for that person that is wired like this from day one as a baby boomer?
Okay. Actually, I went to an all-girl Catholic high school in Fullerton called Rosary High School.
Yes.
And they have a career day that I go and speak at. And I actually go in and I talk to them about the aging process, and I do a timeline on the board. And I'm teaching the younger generations how to think and how to prepare. I tell them what they're doing when they're 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and then I talk about menopause and I talk about all kinds of things that they're not even prepared to or understand yet, because we need to educate them how long we live. I mean, our timeline can go to 100 years.
Absolutely easy.
That's 10 decades.
Easy.
That we can,
Yeah.
So if you break it down into chunks and educate them on how to and what to expect happening in those moments of their life, then they can start processing.
Yeah, I mean, let's stop for a minute and think about that. Okay, you're saying to say somebody is 100 years old is not an unusual thing anymore, right? It's not. I wouldn't say it's 50% of the population, but it's definitely a heck of a lot more.
It's not as rare as it once was.
It's not as rare as you don't even think of it as a rare thing. Oh yeah, I've heard that before, kind of thing, right? So if you're 55 and you're considered senior, this like sort of twilight of your life years, right? That's the way the language
Halfway through the
and
play,
the narrative.
yeah.
And
Right?
no, but 55 didn't used to be halfway.
No.
Now it's exactly that. It's like halfway. You could live for as long as you've been on this friggin' planet. You will live again on this planet.
Right.
So if you stop and think about that, and you think about all the stuff you have done and all the experiences you've got accumulated in this period of time, does it make any sense that for the same equal amount of time, the expectation is that you go quietly into the good night and sit in some chair somewhere in God's waiting room until you basically pass away? It makes no sense whatsoever. And yet the language and the discussions and the narrative, unless it is about medical advancements, doesn't happen. And that's why we are here. You're absolutely right. That's why we are here, because it is a disruptor. This conversation needs to be dealt with as a disruptor. There needs to be disruptors to this. Real estate.
Well, I'm an old radical. I like that idea.
You like that? See, I told you I'd find a purpose for your life.
Yeah.
No, but cities, I mean, this is a larger conversation than even just one industry. It really is about quality of life.
So why do
that
you
we
guys,
want.
you're younger than I am, and you're actively involved in this space, why are you...
Selfish, totally selfish.
Why are you lone voices in the wilderness here? Why are so few people discussing... We talked
I like
about...
to think of myself as an early adapter, but
Well, for example, now, I know you don't want to get in politics, but I'll just do the 2 seconds
It's
we were talking about
unavoidable.
before. We're talking about
We're gonna
tax
run an ad now.
talking about tax reform and how this is going to infuse new money into the economy.
Right.
And I keep saying, but unless you have demand, people aren't going to take that money and build factories and build jobs unless you have demand. And the demand curve is what is sliding downwards because the baby boomers are
Buy
on the
less.
downside of the demand curve. And our kids, for whatever reason, haven't stepped up and picked up the gauntlet.
Well, millennials have different buying habits than baby boomers.
Certainly smaller buying habits.
Right.
They're
I
not
mean,
buying houses yet.
I'm not
They're
going to buy a
buying-
car until later. I'm
Right.
not really
Deferring
just
everything.
killing myself to get started driving the minute I turn 18 and go get my license. It's kind of a common thing, right?
Right.
And so if every person who turns 18 isn't really killing themselves to get a driving license and buy a car.
Or work in some cases.
Right, or even work, right.
Living in the computer
living
world.
In the computer
Right.
world. Then because I want to have that.
Then they're
dot
killing the
boom
consumer
thing.
economy. They're
Well,
killing,
right. But if you don't change cars, if most people in this country don't change cars every 3 to 5 years, the industry's gone.
Right.
Right? I mean, we are
That's
we,
already
we are
changed.
built
Most
on
people
a
are-
debt economy, really.
Right.
Right? If you don't buy stuff that you don't need in quicker time than it would expire,
Exactly.
your economy would crash.
Right. And that's kind of why it hasn't taken
Same thing with
off.
houses, right? I mean, you buy it beyond your means, so you can grow into it. I mean, there's this thing. No, challenge yourself, grow into it. Buy something that's more expensive than you can afford.
Right.
And the society is not really built on the concept of saving. And now you have 78 million people that are shifting paradigm into how
Trying
their
to
spending
save.
habits are, and I can buy everything on here, and I can basically shop it to death and buy. Do you know that Black Monday
Mm-hmm.
Is it Black Monday? Black Monday, right?
Black Monday, yeah.
Black Monday started already.
Oh yeah, they're moving it. They're killing the whole concept of a
When
one-day sale.
when did sales start usually?
Well,
Day
it
after
was-
Thanksgiving.
Day
Correct.
after
We
Thanksgiving.
are 3 weeks prior to that date, and it just keeps moving in the other direction. Pretty soon it'll be like the day after
Because
New Year's.
again, they're trying to stimulate what isn't there. They're trying to encourage demand, and demand has been dropping. You watch all these Fed reports, and the interest rate's down to zero. Money's basically free to borrow, and they can't get businesses or people, consumers to borrow it or businesses to borrow it because demand is shrinking, and nobody wants to address what to me is the elephant in the room, the most obvious drag on our economy here. The lack of demand is the baby boomers
and
spend
money
less.
that's getting reinvested into industry, into infrastructure, that money tends to be automation. It doesn't tend
Well,
to be
that's
job
another part of it,
generation.
right, yeah,
It
exactly.
tends to be, perfect. I'll use the toll road as an example.
The toll road.
Surprise,
That's
surprise.
his other hot topic.
But
here.
look, we had toll booths on
Right.
the 73 that housed people,
Right.
and then those were eliminated. So infrastructure money was spent to establish these booths, and then infrastructure money was spent to get rid of those booths, and basically we shifted more to a transponder component. And like it, when there was a discussion about, Toyota's going to come in and spend like X millions of dollars on their factory, right? Yes, to automate.
Right.
That means less jobs.
Right.
That means less dispensable income.
Which only further impacts the demand curve as we have less jobs, as we have less. Well, I'll give you another interesting fact that we do an investment show that I didn't realize. We've talked about it a couple of times on here. Do you know one of the things propping up the stock market is the fact that there's more money chasing fewer stocks. There are fewer listed stocks today than there were 10 years ago.
Because of consolidation.
Because of consolidation. And fewer IPOs.
So
coming out.
let me switch this conversation back to the real estate side of it. Okay, what does that mean to the person who is either downsizing or the person who is sitting on equity, right? But they basically now they've had a reverse mortgage on it, or they've refinanced it a number of times. When that moment, I mean, you've been dealing with this for a while, right? What is the reality? I mean, when they realize that this is what they have to do, and they start looking at the reality of their situation, what's the common reaction for people? Is it just disbelief? Is it?
They really don't want to face the music, but then usually health concern happens that forces them or the family to get involved.
Somebody
I'm sticking
gets
my
sick.
finger in my ears right now as you're saying this, but go ahead.
He's plugging his fingers. So, and then my biggest fear is this is when investors will swoop in and try and offer a low ball price to get the home.
Because you're desperate.
Right. We'll sell it. We'll buy it for cash in 10 days, and they'll offer them $200,000 less than what it's really worth for fair market value. So my job is to protect them and guide them and let them know, do not do that. Let's put it on the open market. Yes, everything may be in original condition. That's
Right.
typically what sellers,
Sure.
senior sellers have. But, there's going to be a family who's willing to pay
Right.
top dollar or fair market value to get in that community. So that would be the first step.
What about people that are looking, like we were talking about, to move location, and they're not looking to slow down per se, but they're looking to maybe scale down, but their quality of life, their entertainment, all of that stuff is something that they still is very much part of their daily living. So they're moving to maybe a better location. What are those people looking for? I mean, if they are in that older bracket of clients.
Well, usually they can't maintain the large home anymore. So
Right.
now they realize they do need something more simplified. So then they will downsize to maybe a condo or a retirement community. And there's other options of GoGo Grandparent is kind of like an Uber app.
Yeah.
Go grandparent? I never heard of this thing.
Yes. And
It's like Go Gadget.
kind of GoGo Grandparent, and they'll come and pick them up and take them to bingo or doctor's appointment or the grocery store. So there's other ways, or the senior centers, which we've got to get you out the senior centers.
But we got to
They-
change the name. I don't want to walk in
and
the
you know
door.
what? They actually rent them out for different events. People can rent them for parties and
But I got to tell you,
reunions.
I got to tell you, seniors, I've been saying this for the last 5 years, okay? Senior centers are in the best locations usually. They're central located.
Right.
They're paid for by the city. They have commercial kitchens that never get used, okay? And somebody has to wake up and say, look, we are built out communities. We don't have the ability to generate revenue for the cities from large subdivision developments and things of that nature, right? We have a multi-generational component usually, or maybe an older component if it's along the coastline. It's even older, right? And we have this asset that's sitting pretty much vacant because people are not necessarily going there to have meals anymore.
They do. Senior Serve
But
actually is there.
No, I know people, Susan and everybody from Senior Serve, but I will tell you that if you looked at it, the
They're
people that would go,
underutilized.
seniors that would go to a senior center and have meals and hang out and socialize, because they are healthier longer
And happier.
they're not necessarily going to the senior center to do that. They're maybe hanging out. I mean, in San Clemente, I see it every day. There's a group of older women that hang out once a week at the coffee shop in the old historical hotel, and they speak French to one another for 2 hours, and that's their social gathering. It's like going out and having lunch with my girlfriends, but it's not at the senior center. So we have this asset that has this sort of need for
Stigma of it, too.
repackaging. It has to be repackaged, has to be rebranded to where you actually have a space that can bring people together across generation. Have a grandparent, grandchild after primary school. I don't know, yoga class.
Well, they do
or things of that
sometimes
nature.
bring in the younger generations to teach them computers
Right.
or how to play Wii or different, activities. So there are some things happening. The gym, some of the gyms in these facilities are top notch.
Yeah, they're top notch.
Yeah, so don't overlook these communities. Age 50, that's when you can start going.
So I'm
okay,
curious. Which ones have you seen? Let's just give a plug a couple of them.
Okay, Corona Del Mar.
Okay.
Oasis, one of the best ones I've seen. Definitely in Orange
The
County.
Corona Del Mar Senior Center.
I
okay.
would say. And Huntington Beach actually just
Huntington
built
Beach
a
has a great-
brand new one
yeah.
in the Central Park, so that's a good one. Yorba Linda's beautiful as well. I kind of grew up over in that area,
Mm-hmm.
so I would say Anaheim. Believe it or not, Anaheim has a pretty nice one that I've seen. So those I think would be my top
So
four
those
favorites.
cities that you actually mentioned, it's interesting because they're either affluent or they're actually pretty progressive. I mean, Anaheim actually is pretty progressive at the city council level in terms of things that they are doing. From policies about anti-lobbying that they're doing, they're really taking the homeless situation heads on. They're actually engaged rather than just basically bury your head in the sand. And Yorba Linda is on the newer side. Irvine even there was a discussion about a new senior center near the newer developments that are happening towards the hills, and they were talking about some of the same stuff. The interesting thing about it is, like we said earlier, if the city doesn't wake up and do that, the money that is coming in, because I may have a 5,000 square foot house in Villa Park, and I'm not ready to slow down my life, but to your point, I don't want to take care of my yard. I don't want to do any of that stuff. It's too much maintenance for me. I figure I've got another 20 years before I get basically shipped off to somewhere where I need assistance, right? So I'm going to sell my house in Villa Park. I'm going to go to a smaller house, maybe 1,500 square feet or something, but I may be in San Clemente. I may be in Laguna Beach. I may be somewhere else that is closer to the water because my quality of life, now that I have time to spend, not being at work, I can go actually enjoy these communities. If Laguna Beach doesn't do something, for example, and I'm not saying they're not, but if they don't do something to attract that person, and Dana Point does, Dana Point's going to get that money. They're going to get that tax base. They're going to get that spending. The person that's going to walk to that coffee shop.
Start by calling it something other than seniors. When you
You're
label
hearing it directly
something,
from that representative of that generation.
when
I
you
agree.
label it as a senior, that's not for me. That's for the really old.
That's what everybody says when they're seniors. I don't want to go hang out with those old people.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yet
So-
that wasn't what they were saying. And so it's interesting because you almost need seniors to be reflective of their peers' wishes, and not necessarily just solely in terms of medical and Alzheimer's and stuff like that, but just solely in terms of quality of life, in terms of how we live our lives. And it's interesting. Yes, there are absolutely examples like that. Just like there's examples, there's what is that place called? It's in Anaheim, actually. What am I thinking of? That's a multi-level care
The
facility.
museo area?
No. It's actually down. It actually used to be a church. It's gosh, I can't remember. It'll come to me. But basically, there used to be a smaller retirement community. It used to be. It is in a residential neighborhood, which is unusual. But it's an older development, older community that was in there, and they tore it down. There's a church there. I think it's affiliated with a church, and they built this larger complex that had everything from independent living all the way to dementia and hospice. And the interesting thing about that is you could move in, for example, as a couple into independent living, and if one person basically then deteriorated, their condition deteriorated, and they needed a special assistance, they would still be within proximity of one another. So there was a communal approach.
You know, that's Freedom Village that also offers that too.
Freedom Village does that.
A lot of places
This
do
thing
that,
starts,
yeah.
I want to say,
Multi-levels of care, right? You
yeah,
go
it's
through.
Walnut Village.
Okay, I know Walnut. By Disneyland.
By Disneyland. And you walk into Walnut Village, the lobby, I mean, do a lot of work for hotels, right? The lobby is very hospitality. The restaurant's very hospitality. And even when I remember talking to them early on, I don't know if they actually implemented it or not, it wasn't enough to even just have the environment be that, right? It was also important for them to train their staff to where when you went to that dining room, for example, you didn't hear, oh yeah, we're going to take you to the same chair that you sat in with the laminated tabletop. You actually was, oh, Mr. Roberts, how many in your party today? It was more hospitality driven. How you answered and dealt with people was more hospitality driven. It is a very smart way to differentiate your business.
So we got a couple minutes
Because
left.
people are paying out of savings for this stuff.
Couple minutes left.
Right?
Let's
It's
tell
totally
us.
discretionary spending.
Well, let's let Noelle give us a shout out for her business and how do people find her and what does she do and all that.
All right. Well, I am a certified seniors real estate specialist.
Which there's a very important
It's a designation.
Are there many of those?
There more and more people are picking it up as they see that more and more people are aging every day.
More and more people like
but
you.
I have carried it now for 12 years.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
You're getting old in the field.
Yeah, she's aging in the field.
But then I keep learning more and more to offer to my clients and share. And I'm glad we brought this knowledge to the forefront because this is really important to let people know that there are so many options. We do, as a SRES, to define it shortly, we'll do a curb-to-curb walkthrough and guide you on how to sell the house for the most dollar. And without having to work with investors, we'll show you how to prep it and not spend a lot of money and get it up and sold pretty quickly. So, and that's what they want. They don't want people coming through all the time looking at the property. Which I'll just slam it out and get it in escrow and sold pretty quickly.
Are you seeing any seniors that are looking for certain things in places that they are buying when they're scaling down?
Yes, and they're sometimes too picky because it's just not gonna.
Well, the product is not there, right?
Correct.
There isn't really a lot of product that's
They don't want
senior-friendly.
to share community washer and dryers. Like there's certain things that they want. They want parking really close.
Right.
Thinking about
Well,
a
I mean,
walker.
totally
There's certain
understandable,
things,
right.
Yeah. So
No
and-
step up, one
and
level.
there are senior retirement communities that have no stairs. Like you know, I know the Laguna Woods has some of that going on.
I don't know if you recall, but there was an incident in San Clemente relevant to a particular development. I think it was Shore Cliffs. Shore Cliffs is pretty much in a bowl, and there's houses on the perimeter, and there's houses inside the bowl. And there was a big outcry, about maybe almost 10 years ago now, about the zoning in there that you would not allow additions to go up multiple stories. They were just right, and it went to the city. It was a conflict situation that the city weighed in on, and their solution was, okay, if you're in the bowl, you could go up, and if you're on the perimeter, you could go out instead of up because they didn't really want to have more additional obstruction, right? The real estate industry at the time whined about the fact that was really unconscionable. They should allow everybody to be able to add a two-story, right? Within less than 5 years, the properties that were basically sought after were the ones that had the zoning ability to go out and not up.
Well, people like to be able to change things.
Right, but I don't want a two-story house. I want to move in from the Inland Empire to San Clemente. I'm looking for that one level that I can add to.
Right, that you don't have stairs. Like
Exactly.
that's a key that seniors are looking for, one level, no stairs. And so I actually offer resources to have estate sales, liquidation, moving companies, contractors, inspectors. I've streamlined the process for
Right.
them. So when they're ready to go, I've got them, their ducks are in a row.
And
we
should they
just-
only be talking to you when they're facing that reality that they have to sell, or should this conversation really be happening in advance?
happening in advance? I'm actually telling my clients to put it in their wills or their trusts. Write me in, write an SRES person in, because
That's
that
interesting.
way they know that they're going to be handled appropriately.
Interesting. In
So
case
how do
they're
they-
not really there to basically.
How do
Yes,
they
'cause
how
people
do they
don't
reach
know.
you?
Legally, you are able to do that.
They should, yeah, they could put a
Wow,
name,
that's
they could
pretty
put
cool.
a designation, yes.
So how
yes.
do they reach you?
They reach me at my website, which is www.hipkey.tv. And my phone number is
.tv?
Yes, .tv. I've been
She's
doing
host
that.
producer.
Hipke TV.
Hipke TV. I've done web series and a few other fun things. And my phone number is 714-290-4500.
Okay.
Well, I really appreciate you being here, and it's really interesting to be able to sit with somebody that understands that this is really not a small task-oriented thing that we're talking about. Yes, it involves the scaling down and downsizing, and you know, making sure that somebody's covered and you're taking care of them when in a time of crisis in many cases. But there's a bigger conversation that every one of us that's involved in their own field of speciality should be seeing the connectivity and should be pushing for that larger conversation. We should be advocating for that public policy. We should be advocating for that, you know, the way that zoning maybe be worked out in a general plan being redone for a city, for example. And I'm not saying it's all about seniors, but there's definitely 78 million of population that's in the United States alone, and nobody's getting younger. So the baby boomers, once they're kind of maybe transition out, there's this little bridge generation called the Gen Xers, but then there's also more than the baby boomers in the millennials. Okay. So in established communities that are built out, this is actually smart business.
Well, and you know, speaking of that, I knew my main line with sellers was going to be worldwide internet broadcasting to sell a home. So in 2013 and 2014, I went back to school for broadcast journalism, film, editing, production, because I knew it was storytelling online about selling this home.
When was this that you
2013, 2014.
No, that's pretty impressive, because only now, 4 or 5 years later, are we hearing the buzzwords of it's all about storytelling and it's all about, you know, video content.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I was with kids half my age hanging out, but it was a lot of fun. And I also actually been doing pictures for the Newport Beach Film Festival for 10 years now. So I rubbed elbows with some crazy filmmakers from around the world, and I learned and questioned them. You know, I just wanted to be able to provide the best service to sellers, honestly.
But what you just shared, actually, well, here's an interesting thing about that. Your version of getting older, you just defined it as being interacting with people that have my age, in dealing with stuff that's outside my wheelhouse per se, right? Expanding and continuing to learn. And those are critical traits for everybody, because otherwise you're just sitting and deteriorating.
Correct.
I mean, Paul's another perfect example with having taken on
Paul's a perfect example of deteriorating?
No. No, perfect example of exactly the opposite. I give you a lot of grief, but the bottom line is, and I actually do commend you a lot when I talk to people. Here's a gentleman who was going in a certain path, and then he was basically faced with an economic reality based on the economy.
I had a PR firm and all blew up in the Great Recession.
Right, to put it lightly, right? And he basically all of a sudden found himself in a situation where he's basically at home.
Had to reimagine myself, come up with a new career in my 50s.
How old? You were in your 50s.
Yeah, mid-50s.
Right. And so he basically rose to the occasion, took the little money that he had in savings, and he established this. And how many shows do you have on this station right now?
5 years we've been doing it. We're up to about 25, 26 shows now.
So here are two examples, perfectly for everybody to see, right, of exactly what it means to get older. Just because the time continues, it doesn't mean you can't pursue a passion, you can't figure out different paths, you can't reinvent yourself. And all the time, I mean, are you having more fun than you had when you were working in a PR firm?
Way more, way more.
And you're doing something that you actually did when you were in college.
And
he used I don't even know. I've got to find some old tapings for him, right? But he used to do radio in Michigan, right? At college, at university.
I did at the University of Michigan, then I went on and was a professional in Virginia and some other places. Yeah.
So you really
back in the 80s.
You know, we laugh at the fact that you're only as old as you feel, but it's very true. And I have an aunt that's older than my father, okay, and she's like, my dad is like 82, 83. My aunt is older, okay. That woman basically doesn't sit still, and she never got married. Maybe that's part why she didn't get older, right? But she is in Chicago.
Kids age you. I can only
she's
tell
in
you.
Chicago. She comes out to visit. Honest to God, last month she comes out to visit for a week, and we're like, hey, why don't you just stay? I mean, what do you got going on? You got all the time in the world to basically do whatever you want to do. Oh no, I have a very busy schedule. Oh, I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to go on this cruise, and I got my girlfriends, and I basically play cards with them every week, and she's got a full schedule. And you look at her, and both physicality, mental acuity, cognitive abilities, it's all there because she is living life regardless of her age. And in her case, she has worked her environment around her. She lives in a house that's way too big for her. right? But she probably doesn't spend any time in that house because she's too damn busy going around. Anyway, so
We could spend more time in it, but we're out of time.
And I would
so.
like to invite you to come back, because what I really would like to address next time you come in is let's look out for some of these innovative things that some people are doing. Let's dig a little deeper into some of these cities and like why did they do it the way they did it? Because that's an interesting conversation regarding housing, right? And let's give them your website again and how they can get hold of you.
Okay, www.hipkey.tv.
And then you can reach us at the Raad Life, RAADLIFE on Facebook. You can also call me, and you can tell me that I was full of baloney, right, for the last 45 minutes. Or you can share with me, what you thought about this show or other shows that we have.
Don't tell him he was late again, though. He doesn't want to hear that.
Well, I was on the road road to Costa Mesa.
The
Actually,
road
you
to
gave me the
Morocco.
perfect lead-in. I might have to have a poster. But you can reach me at 949-212-8299 or Raad, R-A-A-D, period, GHANTOUS @gmail.com. We really do want to hear from you guys. We keep telling you guys to call. Nobody calls. On occasion, we'll go live. We'll be feeding it live, and people will actually ask questions. But we really would like to hear from you. We've been doing this for 3 years. I know a lot of people watch. Is this information useful, or are you guys just like Paul, basically listening to this stuff and not doing anything about it? Are you
Do something about it.
Do something about it.
Okay, we're gonna
Call
leave
me. I'll have resources.
Yeah,
I'll
there
hook
you
you
go.
up.
Call her, call me. We'll hook you up and let us know. And have this conversation. You got Thanksgiving coming up. You got Christmas coming up. Have this conversation with your family members.
Plan, prepare.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
You have been listening to the Raad Life radio show with your host and age explorer, Raad Gantos, brought to you on the one and only octalkradio.net. Join us again next week as we continue our journey of discovery into life's challenges, opportunities, options, and all the latest and greatest things that come with getting older.